The Bucks do, in fact, sign Gary Trent Jr. to the veteran minimum.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
The breaking news, Camille, is according to the report from Adrian Wojnarowski, the Bucks have agreed to a one-year deal with Gary Trent Jr. for the veteran minimum. But look, we joked about this on yesterday's show of it's got to come sometime soon. Maybe it'll come later in the week. Not necessarily the Bucks, but just Gary Trent Jr. signing, period. He was the best free agent available on the market. We had talked about this for weeks, too, of reports being out there. The Bucks were interested in Gary Trent Jr. And I get the hesitation and trepidation to push back and say there's no way he's taking that veteran minimum contract. But I go back, a week ago, when I think who was reporting the news was what put a lot of Bucks fans off the scent. But when we went through, let's just look at the finances of teams out there. Who has money to spend? Who has a taxpayer mid-level? Who has a full mid-level? We really struggled to find teams outside of those with a veteran minimum that either would have been interested or a fit for Gary Trent Jr. would have made sense. And to me, that was the whole thing this entire time that really kept me continuing to put out there. You can't dismiss this. I don't know that if I was a betting man, I would say they're going to sign him, but you can't dismiss this for that exact reason. And I think that's essentially what we saw. The market just was not there. And this was, in all likelihood, if you're choosing over vet minimums, this was probably ultimately always going to be the best fit for Gary Trent Jr.
We made jokes about that a few weeks ago at this point. I think when we first started throwing out Gary Trent Jr. as a possibility for the Bucks of, well, hey, listen, a one-year deal, the market hasn't shook out the way you wanted to shake out. Why don't you come to Milwaukee for a year? Come to Milwaukee for a year, rebuild that value and see what you can do from there. And we were saying, like, that's the sales pitch. The pitch for the Bucks in particular of all the different minimum contracts is that you will be the starting shooting guard if you come here. Like, there is a lot of playing time on the table for you if you come here. And again, the market just did not work out the way that was anticipated. I mean, last year he opted in to the $18.5 million player option. This current offseason that we're in right now, apparently the Raptors were kicking around, offering $15 million a year. He wanted $25 million a year. The Raptors pulled the offer off the table. And now Gary Trent Jr. was sitting here trying to explore the market and see where his best fit could be. And as we talked about, a lot of the money was drying up really quickly. A lot of teams that he could have went to where it's just kind of like the money wasn't looking right. So it became a realistic possibility of maybe he takes a one-year deal to try to re-up that value again and try the market again next year. And we heard about various contenders having interest in him. The Lakers was a team that were after Gary Trent Jr. They were looking to make some other moves on the side to try to make that possible. The Nuggets, the 76ers, the Knicks were all teams that were listed in some way, some form as a team that has some interest in Gary Trent Jr. in addition to the Milwaukee Bucks. So to see him come to Milwaukee, where he gets to reunite with Damian Lillard, we know Dame's been on the recruiting tip so far this summer. The hope is that, he continues to do that and that Trent, he's here now. It actually happened. Like, I still can't believe that it happened. I made the joke, I'm going to be checking every time I see Woj or Shams. I'm checking to see if it's Gary Trent news. And the news came, Justin, when we were recording what we thought was going to be the Wednesday episode, but that's gotten bumped. So when you guys do hear that episode, you'll hear some real live reactions of us seeing that this move actually has happened.
And comes half a day after we record all right, it's cooled down. It's a possibility, but I don't think they're going to get Gary Trent Jr. So let's just take a look at their offseason and how we would rate that. We both said about a C+ is where you would put out there given what they had to work with, but added, hey, if you do get Gary Trent Jr., this is like a B+ somewhere around there that you're looking for in your offseason. And now I think it was an excellent offseason for John Horst and company because, again, we talked about it quite a bit on the show earlier today, actually, on Tuesday. So you can find that episode for that part of the discourse. But you didn't have much to work with. So you had to really try to maximize those vet minimum spots. As we mentioned, the duo of DeLon Wright and Taurean Prince are upgrades over Pat Beverly and Jay Crowder. Gary Trent Jr. is an upgrade over Malik Beasley. And now that leads us to the next part of the discussion is, we talked about this before of who's going to be that starter. And is it DeLon Wright? Is it AJ Green? Is it Andre Jackson Jr.? Well, I'm pretty confident that starting two guard is going to be Gary Trent Jr. So this is now 2 years in a row and we had this conversation with Frank. I don't remember if it was on the pod or off the air, but hey, is this it's kind of feeling like this another offseason where the starter at two guard is not actually on the roster at this moment.
And lo and behold, he was not, because he is now. It's just the timing of it is I'm still tripping over that, because we literally had our show. We recorded it live on YouTube for Tuesday. And I mentioned, as of, July 16th, this is the grade I'm giving the Bucks off season. It's still July 16th, and I have to update that off-season trade grade. And I think I'm going to go actually like an A- for this, because the Bucks had such limited resources, very limited. We've talked about it, only minimums, given the fact that there were no other trades made to clear up space for them to make any other bigger signings. So to only have 3 vet men at your disposal, and you were able to upgrade some positions there with Taurean Prince coming in as a Jay Crowder upgrade. You get DeLon Wright as a Pat Beverly upgrade, and then you get Gary Trent Jr. as a Malik Beasley upgrade. That's a really good offseason when all you had to throw is vet men's. That's all that was in the tuck, and somehow you were able to have some positional upgrades on the roster. That in itself is a big win for Milwaukee, given where they have been. And it also helps what they were talking about with what they want to do with the rookies, with Tyler Smith and AJ Johnson, which is bring them along slowly. And now you have these vets ahead of them. The competition in camp for the young returning Bucks vets, quote unquote, with your Marjans, your Chris Livingstons, your Andre Jackson Jr., AJ Green, I feel like I'm missing one of them, but those guys. Now, again, the comp goes back up again. There's someone ahead of them where you don't have to rely on them as much if they're not ready. It's just more options and versatility for the Bucks when they only had room to operate around the margins.
Yeah, I mean, again, you cannot overstate. This was a fantastic offseason. Now, if this is it, and I still don't think you're going to see any other trades, we can get into that coming up in our next segment. But as you mentioned, you only had 2 to 3 veteran minimums to work with and your draft picks. We can nitpick the draft picks and not attaching a pick to Pat Connaughton or Bobby Portis, for example, any of those players to get off of salary, to get under that second apron. But again, I just don't know that there's a move that would have made you better. Bucks now stand at 15 players on the roster, which we've seen this pop up as well. As what does that mean for Thanasis? We pointed to, look, he's not playing this year. So the Bucks, I know the prevailing thought that's out there about how they run the team. They're not going to sign Thanasis just to sit next to Giannis on the bench. And now that's official, because this roster is set at 15 players. And, we kind of had a similar discussion about Malik Beasley on the veteran minimum of, hey, pretty good value. And in the regular season, it was great value for John Horst and the rest of the Bucks. But this is markedly better than Malik Beasley. I think we talked about this the other day. We're not suggesting Gary Trent Jr. is an all-defense caliber player on that end of the floor, but he is a better defender than Malik Beasley is. And he can do more offensively than just shoot. I mean, we've seen Gary Trent Jr. get hot and have some big games against the Bucks through the years. But there's more to it than just catch and shoot or one dribble, pull up and shoot from Gary Trent Jr. He's a more rounded offensive player.
He is. He truly is. And I saw this posted on Twitter that Gary Trent Jr. is one of 4 players to record at least 500 made three-pointers and 300 steals over the last 3 seasons. The other 3 players to do that were Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, and Fred VanVleet. And to your point about the defense being better, it just goes to show there. Now, when he got to Toronto, I don't feel as if he ever lived up to what Toronto thought that his two-way capabilities were. Part of that could just be because he had to take on such a big offensive load while he was there as well. And as we've talked about, sometimes when guys do that, then the defense kind of, falls to the wayside. So I do have hopes for him coming here. And again, he's young. He's 25 years old, like turned 25 to start the year. So he doesn't turn 26 until 2025. A young shooting guard here. So him coming into the fold here, better defense. The shooting is there. And he's somebody who, when presented with wide open, shots, he knocked them down. He shot 51% on unguarded catch and shoot threes last season. And you would imagine that with the gravity of Giannis and with Dame, those looks will continue to be pretty wide open for him. We saw Malik Beasley be able to get up a lot of threes in that role. Shoot, I mean, we've seen Grayson Allen get up a lot of threes in that role as well. So that's going to be something, seeing Gary Trent Jr. playing that role, that I cannot wait to see.
Career 39% three-point shooter, and that really peaked in the 21-22 season when he took about 8 threes per game. Playing for the Toronto Raptors, shot 38% that season. His high water mark was 41% from three in the 1920 season with the Blazers, albeit at about 4 attempts per game. But he's a guy that we have routinely see average about 7 3-point attempts per game. Now, we talked a little bit last year about the 3-point splits for the Bucks. Of Pat Connaughton was one of those guys that was impacted when you look at the volume of threes that he took last year versus years prior. Well, you add Malik Beasley, you add Damian Lillard, those numbers, and Brook Lopez too. Those numbers are going to come down. Just for reference, Gary Trent Jr. averaged more 3-point attempts per game than Malik Beasley did in each of the previous 2 seasons. They were pretty in line the seasons prior to that, but exact same shooting percentage throughout their career. Last year with Malik, Camille, you mentioned his catch and shoot for Gary Trent Jr. We talked about this throughout the year. The looks that Malik Beasley was getting when you had Giannis and Damian Lillard on the floor with you, I think that went a long way in explaining going from a 35% three-point shooter in each of the previous 3 seasons to a 41% three-point shooter last year. So not to say, hey, Gary Trent Jr.'s shooting percentage is going to bump up by 6 percentage points, but I think you can start to see, when you got that skill set, the gravity, and how much easier it makes it when those shots are wide open. And this is a better offensive player that we're discussing with that.
It truly is. And I saw the comment come through from Fidel just asking who was our backup point guard at this point. And that's a piece that we've talked about when we had the conversation, I think last week on Locked On, about who is the Bucks starting shooting guard. And looking at the roster at that time, it's constructed. He mentioned it could be DeLon Wright. But here with Gary Trent Jr. coming in place, we're assuming that he is your starting shooting guard, which I think puts
pretty
Wright
safe
in the
assumption.
place. Yeah. I think it puts Wright in a place that just better suits the team, where he can come off the bench and be that backup guard, point guard off the bench. He can just be a combo guard coming off the bench. You can play him with Dame. He can come in and relieve Dame, take that playing time as well. So I think like the roster itself makes a lot more sense now with Gary Trent Jr. on it as that starting shooting guard, and just what the Bucks could be able to do with versatility. I do like it. And the reality of this Bucks team is the same as it was last year, which is you need health. The top 3 guys have to be healthy. If you have Dame and Chris and Giannis, like your chances are going to be really, really good. And then you have to fill in the team around them with pieces that make sense of how they want to operate. And the Bucks have done that so far this offseason, again, with very limited resources all along the margin. So to have now to be able to throw in your rotation. So you have Dame, Gary Trent Jr., Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez. And then off the bench, you have DeLon Wright, you have Taurean Prince. We still have Pat Connaughton, but you also have Bobby Portis. Like
Andre
the team
Jackson
itself.
Jr., Marshawn.
It's
It
making a lot
alleviates
more
some
sense.
of the pressure on those young guys too.
Exactly. So like the team makes a lot more sense. And to your point about the pressure coming off of the young guys as well, I think that adds into what Doc was looking to do when he constructed this team the way he did, with having this many young guys on it. wanted, which is that pull and push between the vets and the young guys. So he said, the vets, they're going to pull on the young guys, and the young guys are going to push the vets because the young guys want to play. It made me even more excited for this upcoming season to start.
So if there's one thing that's worth pointing out, I think it ties into this comment from Connor when we said realistically what the Bucks had to work with and what you could expect them to do. Let's just say they attached a first round pick to a contract and you got under the second apron, or you were able to use taxpayer mid-level, which would have been more money for, let's say in this example, Gary Trent Jr. And you could have gone multiple years then, and then had his bird rights when he becomes a free agent, not next summer, but whenever that is, if it's a 1+1 or a 2+1, whatever, you would have been in a better spot to retain him beyond one season if that were the case. But not knowing that the Gary Trent Jr. piece was out there, and at that time of the draft, not knowing what the market was going to look like because Paul George had not signed yet with the 76ers. So, and again, we've said this several times. That is what imploded this market more than anything. It was tough to find a move where you would have actually been better on the floor opposed to just, we saved money and we opened up something else to bring in a player that may not be at that caliber. Now, you got Gary Trent Jr. on the vet minimum, which when the offseason started, none of us expected. That's the good news is, hey, you on paper, I do believe, are a much better team than you were a season ago. I mean, you take out the coaching ambiguity and how much this coaching staff has improved. Year 2 or 1.5 with Doc Rivers. On paper, better players as well with, as we mentioned, those 3 pieces specifically, Gary Trent Jr., DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince. Those are all better players and put you in a better spot, and younger